some other verses of the Holy Quran, Hadhrat Mirza Tahir inferred that languages were revealed. Allah told how to speak. And again when you read, Allama al-Adama asma'akullaha, Allama Adam al-asma'akullaha, Allama Adam al-asma'akullaha, this also may be referring to the first teaching of language. So we can understand from this that the language was taught by God. Now which language was that? According to Hadhrat Mirza Tahir, that was Arabic. And every language from then on got its derivation from Arabic and started diverging from one common source. Now this was a very tall claim to be made, but again the problem was, as far as the philologists were concerned, that they had to make the same claim themselves but about other languages. They have been trying to establish that Sanskrit was the mother of all tongues. For a time that was the popular theme. Later on they discovered certain fundamental defects of Sanskrit, so that they had to reject it altogether ultimately. So Max Muller, who was once the champion of Sanskrit, he himself had to admit that there's doubts about this. We have to find out some other languages. So they tried to find out certain groups, Semitic groups and that group and that group. And still they could not solve the problem effectively. And then they went, because they were thinking of evolution of languages, and while according to the Holy Quran the language had been revealed and it got deteriorated into other languages. So if you follow the deterioration path, your investigation would take a different route altogether. If you follow the evolution path, then your investigation will be focused on different regions altogether. So that has been the drawback of the secular research on the origin of languages. Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad Sahib of Faisalabad, who is the Amir of Faisalabad and is a great scholar and a very pious man, he took the cue from Hadhrat Mirza Tahir and drew 12 principles out of the Hadhrat Mirza Tahir's book Minanur Rahman, which was written on this subject. In the Minanur Rahman, the first claim was made by Mirza Tahir that Arabic was the mother of all tongues, and also he mentioned 12 principles. Now those 12 principles were generally mentioned. What Sheikh Muhammad Sahib did was that he scientifically organized those principles and applied them to all languages. Now if the theory of gradual deterioration and divergence was correct, then all the languages could be solved through the application of those 12 principles which were based on this fundamental theory. If that theory was wrong, then the results would have been negative. You couldn't have gained anything by the application of those imaginary principles in the wrong direction altogether. Now, the fantastic thing that has happened is that Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad Sahib has already traced more than 14 languages back to Arabic, applying the same principles of gradual deterioration. So, Hebrew is not the mother of Arabic. According to these principles, Hebrew is a deteriorated or a vulgar form of Arabic. The cultural Arabic which was taught, the Arabic Fusha which was taught by Allah, was Arabic of the Holy Quran. But gradually it got deteriorated, and the first initial deterioration was into Hebrew. And as the people spread out to various regions, geographical regions, they started speaking languages according to the geographical influences as well as according to some other influences in a slightly different manner and different way. And because they got severed from the main stream of the language, they also started committing mistakes and sometimes intentionally deforming the language. So language is developed from them into other forms and from them to the other form. So you see a lot of divergence of languages, but not only can you trace them back to the Arabic, but it's so easy to trace them back to first major languages, and then those major languages can be traced back to Arabic. For instance, here in England, we speak English. The older form of English is called Anglo-Saxon. And the Anglo-Saxon was mainly derived from the northern language of Norway, which is called Nordish. And Saxon, they say, had more the Latin influence, and the local people of Saxony used to speak Saxon language, and the Angles came from the north. They were called Angles. And when they conquered this island, they introduced their language, and it got the upper hand ultimately, and the Saxon part got pushed back to insignificance, and the major part of the language became Anglo. This is why it's called English. Now the older pronunciation of Anglo-Saxon reminds us that the Anglo language was itself derived from Persian. And to reach Persian through Anglo-Saxon is an easier route than to reach Persian through English. Because a lot of change has occurred in pronunciation since those days. Now we hear of daughter. And never before we might have thought that the daughter was dukhtar in Persian. But when you go back to the original source of English and read the correct pronunciation of Anglo-Saxon, you are taught by the professor it is dukhtar and not daughter. Exactly the Persian word, dukhtar. And door would never remind you that it is dar. But in the Anglo-Saxon it is dur. So it is much closer. When I mentioned this during my Norway trip recently to some Norwegian scholars, they got extremely interested. One of the professors at the University of Oslo became extremely interested, and she said, it's the first time I've heard of this, and this of course opens a great door of research and exploration for us. So she will remain in contact with us in that regard, I hope. And these are just two examples. There's so many examples can be found. Now Persian can be entirely traced back to Arabic. And during our morning walks, I and one of the Murabi Azhar Sahib used to exercise mentally, trying to trace Norwegian words directly back to Arabic, and we succeeded in so many cases surprisingly. So either through Persian or directly, you can always trace the original words, but by applying the principles laid down by Hadhrat Mirza Tahir Ahmed under divine guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Arshad Sahib, now it's your turn at last.
Hazur, on the behalf of my friend, perhaps it is a wide, I think, wide dream will be of answer about taqdeer and kismat or fortune. He want to...
On this I have spoken quite enough. Yeah. Nothing can be enough on taqdeer. It's a very large subject.
Yeah.
You can't encompass the subject of taqdeer. But I have spoken enough as far as I am concerned, according to my limited knowledge.
Yeah.
So he can always have recourse to older tapes in English or Urdu as he pleases, and that can be, he can be helped there through again the aid of good offices of Mr. Aqil Ahmed.
The thing is, nowadays, the politician and Islam, the politics and Islam, they are merging with each other in Pakistan or other countries. So would kindly Hazur will explain the position or status of politics in Islam. There's also wide scope, perhaps briefly.
That again I have spoken on.